The most dangerous man alive is the one you mistake for powerless. Ever seen what happens when someone finally decides enough is enough? Stick around, because this story will have you questioning everything about justice, identity, and who we choose to ignore. Let us know in the comments section below where you're watching from, and if you believe respect should be earned or never taken for granted. The first time Officer Brent Malloy laid eyes on Derrick Mayweather, he saw nothing. Not the calm stillness of a man who'd seen mortar rounds rain from a black sky and lived to tell about it. Not the restrained tension of a former Army JAG officer whose legal mind had taken down international arms traffickers from behind the walls of a classified courtroom. No. All Malloy saw was a man in a faded hoodie, standing too long outside a county building with a bag slung over one shoulder. Malloy was good at one thing: reading his version of trouble. And in his version, trouble never wore suits unless they were walking into courtrooms with a badge behind them. Civilian Derrick looked too still, too quiet, and in a world Malloy didn't understand, quiet was never safe. He leaned back against the patrol cruiser, tapping the back of his pen against the citation pad as if preparing for a performance. His jaw worked side to side. The new lieutenant was all about appearances, community trust, engagement. There'd been memos, sensitivity briefings. But the moment he saw Derrick standing out front of the Department of Veterans Affairs office, alone, not speaking to anyone, looking too long at the building, he knew he'd found his excuse for action. "Hey!" Malloy called out, his voice already dipped in authority, not a greeting, a challenge. Derrick turned slowly, like a man used to measuring every movement. His face was lined but not aged. Sharp eyes, calculating. He blinked once, clearly deciding how much of himself to reveal in the next few seconds. "Can I help you?" Derrick's voice was low, respectful, but not submissive. "Loitering outside a government building is still a problem last I checked," Malloy replied, striding closer, not waiting for a response. "Got ID?" Derrick offered a small nod and reached into his backpack calmly, without a trace of hesitation. His fingers pulled out a worn leather wallet. Military issued once upon a time. Malloy snatched the ID before Derrick could hand it over properly, already rehearsing the radio call in his head. "Derrick Mayweather," Malloy read aloud, as if testing the name's weight on his tongue. "What brings you out here today?" "Here for someone," Derrick said, offering no elaboration. That restraint. God, how it grated on Malloy. "You got business here or not?" he pressed. "Yes," Derrick replied simply, still offering nothing, still composed, like a man who knew exactly how far this would go, and had already mapped it out 3 steps ahead. Malloy's nostrils flared. "You a vet?" "I'm—" "What branch?" "Army." The pause that followed wasn't long, but it bristled with unspoken things. Malloy wasn't a vet. Never served. Had opinions about those who did, especially the ones who came back and didn't assimilate, the ones who wore that silent pride like armor, never looking away even when you tried to stare them down. "Decorated?" Malloy asked, cocking an eyebrow. "Did my duty." It wasn't the answer Malloy wanted. No salutes. No yes sirs. Just that steady calm that felt more like defiance with each passing second. He handed back the ID like it was laced with something foul. "You're being watched," Malloy said. "Keep that in mind next time you decide to hang out like it's your front porch." "I'm not the one making a scene," Derrick replied, voice steady as a drumline. Malloy stepped closer. Too close. "You're a nobody now," he said. "Don't think you get special treatment because you wore a uniform once." Derrick didn't move, didn't blink, but something behind his eyes shifted, like a door opening in a dark hallway. Not rage, not even indignation, just calculation, cold, precise, and absolute. "I'll remember that," Derrick said. His tone was soft, but something about the way he said it made Malloy instinctively take a half step back. He wouldn't know until much later, months down the line, how those words would come to haunt him. He wouldn't know that the man he'd just dismissed would spend that very night dusting off old files and calling in favors that reached beyond the walls of the city, past state lines, into the bowels of federal law. Malloy wouldn't know that when Derrick walked away from that sidewalk, he carried the first draft of a war. Not one fought with guns, but with briefs and subpoenas and affidavits, written in the kind of language that shook departments from the inside out. But for now, all Malloy saw was a man walking away quietly, and in his arrogance, he chalked that up as a win. Derrick made it back to his car, a rust-bitten Toyota that hadn't had working A/C in 4 years. He didn't sit for a long time, just stared out the windshield, watching Malloy strut back toward his cruiser like a man who'd tamed something. Then, without anger, without bitterness, Derrick pulled out his phone. He didn't dial, not yet. Instead, he opened a folder tucked inside his passenger seat. It had only 2 things: a photo of a young man in uniform, his best friend, killed stateside by police 2 years prior, and a half-finished legal complaint that had once been too painful to finish. Until today. He picked up the pen, checked the wording, adjusted one clause. Then he made the call. "I want to reopen the Mayweather file," he said. "Yeah, that one. Tell the DOJ I'm ready." The third ring was picked up by a voice so sharp and dry it could have sliced paper. "Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. Who's calling?" "This is Derrick Mayweather. I'm invoking Contact Clause 312, retained status, under Federal Pro Bono Counsel, referencing the Patrick R. Sims wrongful death inquiry." A pause. Another voice came on the line. "Mayweather." This one sounded younger but startled, like someone who'd seen a ghost. "Still alive," Derrick answered. "More or less. Jesus, we thought you were out." "He was. Now I'm in." Derrick kept his voice even, but inside every word tasted like ash. For 3 years, he'd filed complaints, letters, Freedom of Information Act requests. Then came the silence. Doors shut. Cases buried under red tape and procedural dismissals. He'd stopped counting the excuses, but he never stopped remembering. Patrick Sims, 28, former Special Forces, black, unarmed, and shot 6 times in a gas station parking lot after an officer said he feared for his life. The body cam footage never surfaced. The department said the camera malfunctioned, witnesses were inconsistent, and somehow the investigation folded in 90 days. Patrick was his closest friend, his brother in every way but blood. They'd gone through JAG training together, been deployed together, and, when Derrick got out, Patrick followed not long after. They were supposed to start a non-profit legal clinic for veterans, civilian justice for those who wore the uniform. Instead, Derrick buried him. Now he was done burying. "We need full access to the files we shelved," Derrick said, pacing his living room in slow circles. The blinds were shut, the air stale. "And I'm filing a notice of claim against the city of Fair Park and the Fair Park Police Department." That case was closed. Statute lapsed. "No," Derrick replied. "Wrongful death statute in conjunction with civil rights violations under federal oversight was told. We argued that. You agreed. It's all in the memo from March 2022. The language was clear. And now I have cause." "What kind of cause?" "A new incident. I was profiled, harassed, and defamed today by one of the same officers who handled Patrick's scene, Brent Malloy, badge 6721. The silence on the other end was suddenly full of motion. Murmured voices, keyboards clicking, someone closing a door. "And you're going federal?" Derrick didn't answer immediately. He looked at the wall above his desk, at the framed discharge papers, the letter from the president thanking him for his service, the commendation from NATO, the black and white photo of him and Patrick at Camp Victory. I'm filing a $500 million 0 cents federal lawsuit, he said. And I'm naming names. Later that night, the lights were dimmed in his apartment, save for the glow of 2 desk lamps and the ambient flicker of a laptop screen filled with open tabs. Case files, PDFs of depositions, scanned autopsy reports. Derrick sat in a plain T-shirt, his dog tags clinking faintly as he leaned forward, clicking through folders so old they were archived in compressed drives. Every line of text felt like a resurrection. The coroner's inconsistencies, the officer's edited testimony, even the radio dispatch logs. They all returned like ghosts summoned by will alone. He wasn't alone in the room. Across from him, seated on the edge of the couch with a notepad balanced on her knees, was Elena Ramirez, 26, freelance investigative journalist and dangerous. You're seriously filing this? I've filed it, Derrick said, sliding a signed document across the table. And you want me to go public with it, this story? I want you to do what you do best. Dig. Elena hesitated. You realize how big this could get. Derrick leaned back and looked her in the eye, and counting on it. Elena was the first person who had listened, really listened, after Patrick died. She'd written a long-form expose on systemic bias in Fair Park's police force, citing interviews with over 20 veterans who had experienced racial profiling, abuse, and targeted harassment since returning home. Her article was never published, pulled last minute. The editor-in-chief later resigned under pressure no one could quite explain. Since then, she'd freelanced. Her work was raw, focused, unpolished, but truthful. And that made her dangerous. Why now? Elena asked, tapping her pen thoughtfully. You've been quiet for 3 years. I thought silence was strength, Derrick replied. Turns out it's just isolation dressed in discipline. She stared at him for a moment. That's a hell of a quote. I've got better ones, he said, cracking the faintest of smiles. Wait until I get to deposition. The clock ticked past midnight. Outside, the city throbbed in the distance, neon signs bleeding into cracked sidewalks. Fair Park never slept. But Derrick could feel its pulse more clearly now than ever before. A knock came at the door. Derrick stood up immediately, eyes narrowing. Elena tensed. Are you expecting someone? No. Derrick stepped lightly across the apartment, not out of fear, but habit. He peered through the peephole. Tyrone Ty Jennings. He opened the door. Ty stepped in without needing permission. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a prosthetic left leg that made a soft click every other step. His beard was thick, peppered with gray. His eyes were the same as they were the day he and Derrick survived that rooftop ambush in Diyala province. You did it, didn't you? Ty said. Filed it. Derrick nodded once. Ty clapped a hand on his shoulder and held it there. But then time. Ty pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket and slid it onto the desk. Elena picked it up and scanned it. Wait. This is a letter from Councilwoman Harris. She's backing him? She is now, Ty said. Her cousin served with Patrick. When she heard the tape, she switched. What tape? Derrick asked. Ty pulled out a USB drive and held it up like it was the Ark of the Covenant. I was cleaning out my storage unit. Found this stuck in an old GoPro. Patrick must have been wearing it the night he got killed. Derrick's heart dropped. He reached for the drive like it was a lit fuse. You listened? Oh. I brought it to you first. Derrick stared at it. Whatever was on that tape, it could blow the case wide open. Or sink it. And deep down some part of him already knew. Justice didn't come gently. It came clawing, screaming, at a price. He plugged it in. The screen flickered to life. A static pop. The blurry outline of a gas station awning, distant voices, then Patrick's calm voice, slightly muffled but clear. Sir, I haven't done anything. A second voice, frantic. Stop moving. Get on the ground now. Patrick again. I'm not resisting, I just wait. 6 rapid pops. Then silence. Then footsteps. Then a whisper from the second voice, unaware he was being recorded. Another effing nobody, no camera, no problem. Derrick shut the laptop. No one in the room breathed. Elena broke the silence. You've got a war on your hands now. Derrick looked at them both. No, he said. I've got a war to finish. The press didn't come all at once. It started small, like everything that burns bright eventually does. A late-night blog post. A 30-second clip shared on a subreddit dedicated to military justice. Then, a single tweet from a retired colonel with 500,000 followers. When a JAG vet files a $500 million 0-cents lawsuit, the system better pay attention. By sunrise, Derrick Mayweather's name was trending. By noon, so was the city of Fair Park. Derrick didn't flinch. He sat in his car outside the courthouse, suit jacket draped over the passenger seat, hands calm on the wheel. A printed copy of the complaint, over 300 pages thick, rested on the dash beside him like a loaded weapon. The words inside weren't emotional, they were surgical, cold, relentless. Every line carefully chosen to not just accuse but expose. Inside those pages lived the ghosts of a failed system. Line-dyked lies, falsified reports, internal emails from the department buried behind vague subject lines. The kind of corruption that never made headlines because it was designed not to. But now, the quiet man the system had hoped would disappear was walking straight through their front door, with receipts and a press pass waiting for him on the other side. Derrick buttoned his shirt slowly, checked his tie in the mirror, then opened the door. Elena met him at the steps. "They're waiting," she said, her breath short. CNN, Fox, local affiliates. Even a crew from Al Jazeera is setting up. He looked past her, saw the tripod legs and camera lights already taking position on the sidewalk. Microphones. Reporters in blazers rehearsing sound bites. Police cruisers 2 blocks out, circling like sharks. "They're not here for justice," Derrick said flatly. "They're here for a show. Then give them something worth watching." She didn't say it lightly. Elena had gone to war for this too. Her exposé was published the same morning. Her byline stretched across multiple platforms. She'd printed the transcript of Patrick's last words. She'd linked the department's misconduct record. She'd burned every bridge, with every editor who once told her, "Veteran stories don't trend unless they die overseas." Now they were trending. Inside the courthouse, the air was colder than usual. The security guards didn't look at Derrick like a man carrying justice. They looked at him like a man carrying trouble. Their eyes lingered on his file box as if it might detonate. "Name?" one asked without meeting his gaze. "Derrick Mayweather," he replied. The guard's brow twitched. Recognition. But no words. Just a curt nod and the low groan of the metal detector opening for him. He passed through. On the 12th floor, 2 government attorneys waited in a glass-walled conference room like men prepared for rain but caught in a thunderstorm. Both wore the same bland suit. Both had laptops already open. The kind of men trained not to show emotion, even when they were bracing for a $500 million 0-cents punch. One of them stood when Derrick walked in, the other didn't. "We've reviewed the pre-filed documents," the one standing said, gesturing toward the chairs. "You're serious about going forward with this?" "If I wasn't," Derrick said, setting the box gently on the table, "you wouldn't be here." They exchanged a look, brief, calculating. "And the sum?" the seated one asked. "It's aggressive. So is systemic violence. Do you have legal representation?" "I am legal representation." They blinked. Then the standing one leaned forward. "Mr. Mayweather, this lawsuit, if pursued, will tear into not just a police department, but a city budget, a state agency, and multiple federal oversight bodies. You're naming the mayor, the police commissioner, the former state attorney general, and 3 federal judges in your claim. I'm aware. Do you have precedent? I'm the precedent. The younger of the two flinched. The older one stared. Somewhere behind that silence lived fear, not of the lawsuit, but of the man who hadn't blinked since walking in. Derrick pulled out a single piece of paper from his file. Here's the list of whistleblowers prepared to testify under seal, he said. 6 officers, 3 dispatchers, 1 retired deputy chief, all willing to confirm the existence of deleted footage, tampered reports, and off-book squad activity. And what do you want, Mr. Mayweather? He looked them both in the eye. I want it all on record. I want a jury to see the truth. And I want Fair Park to know that one man can't bring back the dead, but he can damn well haunt the living. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Ty waited on the steps, arms crossed, watching as reporters swarmed like bees to a flare. He's in there tearing the walls down, he muttered. A young woman standing nearby turned. You know him? I bled next to him. That made her pause. Is it true, she asked, about the recording? Ty nodded. It's worse than they know. And a lawsuit? Ty looked at her, eyes hard. It's not a lawsuit, he said. It's an autopsy. Meanwhile, across town, in a modest 2-story building with peeling paint and a flickering front sign that read Vet Guard Legal Clinic, phones rang non-stop. Emails poured in. Veterans from across the country began sending messages, stories, affidavits, photos of bruises, body cam footage they downloaded before it vanished. Many of them had never spoken up. Some had tried and been buried by silence. But Derrick Mayweather's name had become a signal. One message read, I was arrested in 2019 in Fair Park. I told them I was a combat vet. They laughed, said, so what? I still have the dash cam video. Want it? Another. My brother served with Patrick. He told me there was another tape. They buried it in an evidence locker marked lost property. I'll testify. Within 24 hours, the case file had tripled in size. By evening, the city attorney's office released a carefully worded statement. We are reviewing the civil claim and will respond through the proper legal channels. We take all accusations seriously. At this time, no wrongdoing has been found. No wrongdoing. Derrick read the line 3 times before closing the browser. Same song, he muttered. Different choir. Elena looked up from the kitchen, coffee mug in hand. They're scared. They should be. He stood up, stretching slowly. His body ached in all the ways it always did after a day like this. The old shrapnel near his spine still pulsed when he walked too long. His shoulders still clicked from the IED blast in Mosul. But his voice? That never faltered. I've got a deposition tomorrow, he said. Elena nodded. Want me there? No press allowed. Wait outside. Derrick stared at the wall a moment, at the faces of men he'd buried in frames. Patrick, Tony, Rivas, all of them gone. And yet, somehow, still fighting. Tomorrow would be war in a courthouse. And Derrick Mayweather was no longer coming as a witness. He was coming as a reckoning. Derrick sat in a windowless conference room, gray walls pressing in like a box carved out of concrete and bureaucracy. He didn't wear the sharp navy suit from yesterday. Today it was charcoal wool, slightly more relaxed at the shoulders, no tie, intentionally chosen to look unimpressed, unshaken. Like a man who'd shown up not to perform but to correct the record. Across from him sat the assistant city attorney, Carolyn Royce, 38, polished, with the kind of confidence that came from winning without trying. She adjusted her collar and gave a nod to the court stenographers seated at the far corner of the table. The man between them, Special Hearing Officer Matthew Klein, was older, with thinning hair and the demeanor of someone who hated wasting time, even when the job was built on it. Mr. Mayweather, Klein began, eyes narrowing behind frameless glasses. You understand that you are here voluntarily, but under oath? I do. Anything you say can be used in civil discovery and, if applicable, criminal referral. I understand. Are you currently represented by counsel? I represent myself. Klein glanced at Royce. She nodded, but looked less sure than she had 5 minutes ago. Proceed, Klein said. Royce tapped a pen against her notes, then folded her hands. Mr. Mayweather, in your complaint you claim you were the victim of harassment by Officer Brent Malloy outside the Fair Park Veterans Affairs building. Can you describe what occurred? Derrick leaned forward, steady. I was standing outside the building, waiting for someone. Officer Malloy approached, accused me of loitering, and demanded identification. I complied. He made derogatory remarks, dismissed my military service, and labeled me a... And that's what you're basing your federal claim on. Derrick stared at her, unmoving. That's what I'm starting it with. Royce smiled. Too quickly, the kind of smile that hides a dagger. So just words. No physical contact, no arrest, no detainment. No, but it's more complicated than that. She leaned forward, pressing. You're a trained JAG officer. Surely you know the bar for civil rights violations requires more than hurt feelings. Derrick blinked slowly, let the silence stretch. Ma'am, he said, I've seen men walk away with limbs missing and still hold their heads higher than your officer. It wasn't what he said. It was who he said it to. And why? Klein raised a hand. Let's keep commentary minimal, stick to facts. Royce flipped to a second tab in her binder. You also allege that Officer Malloy had direct involvement in a 2021 incident regarding Patrick Sims, now deceased. However, Officer Malloy was never formally charged or even noted in the final public-facing incident report. Are you introducing new evidence? What is that evidence? Derrick reached into his folder and placed the USB drive onto the table. Royce looked at it, as if it were radioactive. The device contains audio captured by a secondary camera worn by Patrick Sims on the night he was killed. It records Officer Malloy's voice both during and after the shooting, contradicting his original statement. And where was this device discovered? In a storage locker that belonged to Patrick. It was logged under personal effects, mislabeled as miscellaneous electronics. Is it authenticated? It will be by the time this reaches trial. Klein leaned forward, voice sharp. Have you submitted this to law enforcement? I've submitted it to federal oversight. Royce frowned. Chain of custody is questionable at best. So is your department's moral compass, Derrick replied. Klein banged his pen on the table. Enough. A long pause followed. Royce collected herself, turning the page again. Her tone shifted. Calmer, but colder. You allege a coordinated pattern of misconduct within Fair Park PD. Are you suggesting this is institutional? I'm not suggesting it, Derrick said. I'm proving it. You've subpoenaed 12 officers. Several are retired. Some are still on active duty. Have you threatened them into cooperating? Derrick almost laughed. Almost. I don't threaten soldiers. I ask them to remember who they used to be. Royce closed her binder, slowly. Final question, Mr. Mayweather. Are you doing this for money or for vengeance? Derrick's eyes didn't move from hers. I'm doing this so no one has to explain to their best friend's mother why the last sound he heard was a man in uniform calling him a nobody. The room went still. Even the stenographer looked up. Klein let out a slow breath. Deposition suspended, he said. Pending document review and evidence verification. The gavel wasn't needed. His voice had enough weight to close the walls. Derrick stood, collected his folder. Royce didn't say a word. As he walked out into the hallway, Elena stood up from a nearby bench. She'd been there the whole time, pretending to read a magazine. Her eyes met his. How bad? She asked. He shook his head. They walk into a trap. Back in the city, the Fair Park Police Department was already spinning. A press release hit inboxes within the hour. The department respects the legal process and is cooperating fully. Officer Brent Malloy is currently on leave, pending administrative review. Administrative review. Derrick had heard that phrase so many times it no longer meant anything. It was the sound of a machine fixing its own paint job while the engine remained cracked. But it was also confirmation. They were scared. By evening, the video had leaked, unofficially, but purposefully. The audio wasn't clean, the footage was shaky, but the voice was unmistakable. Another fucking nobody. No camera. No problem. I posted it to a forum of veterans that ballooned to over 10,000 views in under an hour. Someone mirrored it on X, then TikTok, then Reddit. It was viral by midnight, and it wasn't just veterans watching now. It was students, families, law professors, people who'd never served a day in their life but knew injustice when they heard it. A public forum sprang up outside City Hall the next morning. Veterans showed up in uniform. Some wore medals. Others wore shirts with slogans. Alina was there with her mic, broadcasting live. "This isn't just about one man," she said. "This is about a system that chose silence over truth, and now one man is forcing it to speak." Derrick stood at the edge of the crowd. And not on the podium. We're at the mic, just watching, letting the echo of Patrick's last words ripple into something louder than any courtroom. And yet, even as the crowd grew, even as the story spread, he knew the real fight was still coming. The judge had accepted the complaint. The city had 30 days to respond, and Derrick Mayweather was preparing for war, one affidavit at a time. The courtroom was full before the sun had even broken the horizon. Seats packed with veterans, families, civil rights activists, journalists. Not a single camera was allowed inside. But that didn't stop the sketch artists or the pens scribbling feverishly across notebooks in every row. Outside, the line wrapped around the building like a coil of tension the city had been holding in for years. Derrick sat alone at his table, no co-counsel, no team of paralegals, just a man with a binder, a laptop, and a quiet storm behind his eyes. On the other side of the courtroom sat the city's defense team. 4 attorneys in matching suits, each with laptops open, color-coded exhibits tabbed and ready. Carolyn Royce was among them, flanked by a new addition, a D.C. attorney from a firm known for defending agencies in high-profile lawsuits. Derrick didn't blink. Judge Raymond Kessler entered the courtroom. He was in his late 60s, former Marine, famously no-nonsense, with a stare like a blade. He took his seat behind the bench and looked across the room, letting the silence settle into something solid. "This court is now in session," the bailiff announced. "Federal Case 2025, CV 1148, Derrick Mayweather versus the City of Fair Park, Fair Park Police Department, Officer Brent Malloy, et al." Kessler adjusted his glasses and looked down at the docket. "I've reviewed the preliminary filings. Let me be clear. This is not television. This is not spectacle. If anyone thinks they're here for a show, leave now. This is federal court. We deal in facts, not theater." Not a soul moved. "Mr. Mayweather," Kessler said, eyes locking onto him, "you are both plaintiff and legal counsel, is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you're prepared to proceed?" "And now," Kessler turned to the defense. "That's right. We are, Your Honor." "Then let's begin with opening statements." Royce stood. Her voice was calm, measured. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is not what it appears to be. My client, the City of Fair Park, is being accused of systemic misconduct based on isolated incidents and speculative evidence. While Mr. Mayweather's story is tragic, it does not rise to the level of a federal civil rights violation. Officer Malloy acted within the scope of his duties, and we will demonstrate that any claims to the contrary are unsubstantiated. We ask that you judge this case not on emotion, but on law." She sat down, folding her hands neatly. Derrick rose slowly. He didn't approach the jury box. He didn't even lift his notes. He simply looked each juror in the eye. You're going to hear a lot about what's legal, he began. What's admissible. What's within the scope of duties. But I want you to listen for something else. I want you to listen for silence. The kind of silence that follows after a man screams and nobody answers. After a mother buries her son and the reports are sealed. After the body cam fails, the footage disappears, and the officers get promoted. That's the silence this case is about. He paused, then looked at the judge. I'm ready to call my first witness. Kessler nodded. Proceed. Derrick turned toward the gallery. Elena Ramirez. Elena stood from her seat and walked to the witness stand, a stack of documents pressed to her chest. She took the oath, her hand steady as she placed it on the Bible. State your name and occupation for the record. Elena Ramirez, investigative journalist. You've published articles on this case? Yeah. Did you author the expose that revealed deleted communications between the Fair Park PD and the city attorney's office following the death of Patrick Sims? I did. Were those documents verified? Yes, by 2 independent forensic analysts. Were they public before your report? No. They were uncovered through an anonymous source and verified by metadata and department login records. And what did those communications show? Helena looked at the jury. They showed that Officer Malloy's initial statement was altered, twice, and that a video file labeled Sims_Gasstat_Cam3 was deleted from the evidence server 6 days after the incident. The courtroom murmured. Royce objected. Speculation. Kessler raised a hand. Overruled. The witness is citing verified documentation. Continue. Derrick nodded. Did you also find evidence that Officer Malloy had a prior complaint filed against him involving a veteran? Yes. A man named Darius Kellerman, U.S. Navy, medically discharged. He filed a complaint for excessive force during a traffic stop. It was dismissed without internal review. Derrick stepped back. Let the silence stretch. No further questions. Royce declined to cross-examine. Next came Ty Jennings. He took the stand with the quiet dignity of a man who had seen both war and betrayal. His prosthetic clicked as he walked to the chair. Mr. Jennings, how did you know Patrick Sims? We served together. Were you aware of the body cam Patrick wore the night he died? He helped him rig it. Why? Because he said he didn't trust what would happen if things went sideways. He told me they'll make me a headline and then a statistic. He wasn't wrong. What did you hear on the footage? Ty's voice dropped lower. I heard Patrick say he wasn't resisting. I heard 6 gunshots. Then I heard someone say, "Another feffing nobody." That voice belonged to Malloy. I'd heard it in briefings, in locker rooms. It was him. Derrick turned to the jury. Do you think Patrick's race had anything to do with how he was treated? Ty looked away, jaw clenched. I think if his name had been Preston Whitaker and he drove a Tesla, he'd still be alive. Royce objected. Kessler let it stand. Derrick's final witness was unexpected. It was one of their own, Officer Regina Caldwell, a 10-year veteran of the Fair Park PD. She walked into the courtroom with resignation in her eyes and fire behind it. You understand you are testifying against your department? Yes. You requested whistleblower protections? Yes. Tell us why you're here. She inhaled deeply. Because I can't look at my kids and tell them I stayed quiet. Because I saw what they did to Patrick Sims. Because I saw the memo that went out after, the one that said anyone discussing the body cam incident would be reassigned or put on psychological leave. Because I saw what they did to the evidence log. And because I watched Officer Malloy get promoted 2 months later. Royce stood, furious. Your Honor. Kessler raised his voice. Sit down, Miss Royce. You'll have your turn. Derrick nodded to Caldwell. Thank you for your courage. She stepped down, eyes glassy. The courtroom was silent. Not a sound. Derrick returned to his table, collected his notes, and sat back in his chair. Kessler looked over the room. "We'll reconvene for cross-examination tomorrow," he said. "Court is adjourned for today." The gavel dropped, and though no one clapped, no one cheered, no one moved, everyone knew something had shifted. This was no longer the trial the city feared. It was the truth they couldn't stop. Rain began falling on the courthouse steps as early as 7 a.m. It came in sheets, whispering over umbrellas and slicking the marble facade like the world itself had paused to cleanse what it could before the final reckoning. The line outside still stretched around the block. Some stood in ponchos, others didn't bother. Veterans in dress blues, mothers holding framed photos. People too long ignored who saw themselves, somewhere in the case of Mayweather v. Vive, inside the courtroom the atmosphere was breathless. Derrick stood once again in his charcoal suit, not out of vanity but resolve. He looked rested, eyes alert, back straight. No notepad in his hand, no folder on the desk. Just him, upright, like a soldier returning to base, knowing this was the last patrol. The jury had spent 13 hours in deliberation. That alone spoke volumes. The city's bench sat stiff. Royce looked pale. The D.C. attorney from the previous week was absent, pulled out, or perhaps smart enough to know what was coming. Even Judge Kessler had shed some of his detachment. His expression was unreadable, but the faint twitch in his jaw said he'd seen more in this courtroom than most would ever admit. "All rise," the bailiff said. The jury filed in. The forewoman, a middle-aged black woman in a burgundy blazer with no makeup and proud eyes, clutched the verdict sheet like it weighed more than it should have. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Kessler asked. "We have, Your Honor." "Please read it." In the matter of Derrick Mayweather versus the city of Fair Park, the Fair Park Police Department, Officer Brent Malloy, and associated defendants, we, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff. A ripple shot through the courtroom. For the matter of wrongful death and suppression of evidence in the case of Patrick Sims, we find in favor of the plaintiff. A sound, half gasp, half prayer, escaped from a woman in the third row, Patrick's mother, hands over her mouth, shaking. On the matter of civil rights violations, profiling, and retaliation, we find in favor of the plaintiff. Royce closed her eyes. The forewoman's voice didn't waver. We award compensatory damages in the amount of $22 million. We award punitive damages in the amount of $480 million. No one moved. It wasn't shock. It was gravity. Even the reporters stopped scribbling. Even the sketch artist dropped her pencil. Judge Kessler leaned forward. "Let the record show that the jury has ruled in a manner consistent with the plaintiff's claims and has found systemic failure of protocol, ethics, and duty by multiple levels of authority within the city of Fair Park and its police department." He turned to Derrick. "Mr. Mayweather, do you have a statement for the court before we close?" Derrick stood slowly. He looked first to the jury, then to the gallery, then back to the bench. "Yes, Your Honor." He walked forward, not with the pride of victory, but the burden of vindication. "I didn't bring this case for money. I didn't bring it to make headlines. I brought it because the world needed to remember that justice doesn't only belong to the powerful. Sometimes it starts with one man, one voice, one moment when silence isn't enough anymore." He glanced to Patrick's mother, then to the seat where Patrick would have been. "My friend didn't die for nothing. None of us served this country to come home and be told we're expendable. We are not nobodies. We are the reason this country still stands." Kessler nodded. "This court is adjourned." The gavel fell. The sound echoed like a drumline of history. Outside the courthouse, rain had stopped, but the crowd hadn't left. As Derrick emerged, the applause started slow. Hands clapping, voices shouting, flags rising into the gray morning. Then the crowd parted. Ty was waiting for him. Elena stood next to him, mic tucked away, no longer the reporter, but the friend. "You did it," Ty said. No, Derrick replied. We did. Elena smiled. The whole country's watching. You know that, right? Derrick nodded. Then let them see something worth watching. Across town, the news hit like thunder. Screens lit up in barber shops, gyms, waiting rooms. The veteran community online exploded. Hashtags trending, tributes pouring in. Cities began calling for internal reviews. Other officers came forward. Within a week, 5 separate departments opened misconduct investigations based on testimonies connected to the trial. Derrick didn't disappear. He founded a foundation, the Sims Initiative for Justice and Accountability, legal aid for veterans, civil rights litigation, training programs for departments on bias and reform, not PR campaigns, real change, root and stem. He refused TV interviews, turned down book deals. But he did show up, again and again, for the people whose voices were almost lost. In one photo, weeks later, he stood beside Ty and Patrick's mother at a community town hall. Behind him, a banner read, "Your uniform doesn't expire after discharge." It became a rallying cry. On the anniversary of the verdict, a bronze plaque was unveiled outside the same courthouse. It read, "This is where silence was broken. This is where justice answered back." Below the inscription, Derrick Mayweather, United States Army, citizen of conscience. And beneath that, etched in small letters, a single sentence. I am not a nobody, because he never was. And now, because of him, neither was anyone else who'd been made to feel that way.